What is the IT strategy for the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM? How is it modernizing its IT systems and infrastructure? And what is OPM doing to secure its IT systems? I'll explore these questions and so much more with my very special guest, Guy Cavallo, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. Building the office from scratch like you're doing in terms of motivating the transformation, keeping the legacy but going beyond that, there's got to be some challenges to that. And I was wondering if you could identify some of your management challenges, say the top three, if you will. How have you sought to address those challenges?
Let's definitely talk about personnel, because that's always in the federal government is going to be something where we're always struggling to compete with private sector. Mm-hmm. So even if you're doing everything right, it's going to be a management challenge for you. What I've seen executives do over time is when you need to make a major technology shift, you have three paths that you can take. One is you go out and hire contractors and empower them to do all the change. And because you're asking for the current skills that they need or cloud-based skills that your current staff may not have, and you basically set your present staff aside. The other option is you provide training and certification programs for the present staff, but you need to invest 3 to 5 years for them to pick up the skills of where you need to go before you can even start that migration. I think both of those are wrong. Mm-hmm. So I've come up with Plan C, which is a hybrid where you do both. I bring in outside experts that have the current skills, like our migrations to the cloud now that have migrated to the cloud before, and I intermix them with my present staff that knows the legacy systems but hasn't had time to learn the cloud. So I think that's really the only way you can do this successfully. The first two, if you do the first, the contractors might get you there, but when they leave, your legacy staff doesn't know how it happened or how to support it, and that ends up being a failure. And usually you don't have time to wait to get everybody up to speed, and even there, they're just getting training. They don't have that practical experience of moving a major government information system to the cloud. So I think that's the right way to do it. So, that's how I'm handling personnel. The other thing that we've done is we've invested heavily in training my present staff. We provide unlimited cloud training to everybody on the staff. And also I pay for their cloud certifications. So just in the last few months, I've had about 35 employees get cloud certified of the legacy team to be able to work with the cloud contractors that are there. And then every month I recognize those accomplishments in our all-hands meetings. Right. So that's personnel. The other two big ones that everybody will have are money and culture. So on the money side, when OPM went through the merger and the background investigation system was split off from OPM and assigned to DoD, that happened pretty quickly, and nobody really had time to figure out what are the costs of the impact of that. So I'm still dealing with the costing of, we did transfer system ownership, we did transfer a number of positions, but together the organization's cost for network support and help desk and cybersecurity, all the basic IT functions, with not having that extra income from supporting the background investigation systems, my budgets are very strained. And so we're still working out to get that cost. When you do a separation like that, especially if it happens quickly, nobody's really taken the time to figure out, well, what would be the cost to OPM as a standalone agency to pay for these things? And so while I'd like to put more money towards modernization, I'm still working to fill some of those holes on the budget side. Mm-hmm. Have a very good relationship with OMB and Capitol Hill. I'm very transparent with them. One thing about OPM being in the spotlight is we're one of the few agencies that has external organizations doing extensive studies of what it takes to fix OPM. We had a McKinsey study that highlighted how many tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars we needed to modernize what we have. Last year, NAPA did a very extensive study of OPM highlighting that the technology was lagging that. So again, a lot of agencies don't have that extra data, but we have it, and I'm working through our budget process and working with the Hill as much as we can to make sure that we're properly funded. And then the third big challenge is culture. The thing that I always tell my IT staff is if you are opposed to change, why did you pick technology as a career when it's changing every day? You should have become an accountant or something else. Wherever I've worked, there's always a core that has fallen in love with a technology or a process, and to modernize that or change that is difficult. What I do is communicate. Why are we doing this? What are the improvements? How will your job change? Your job isn't going away. For example, I have some engineers that currently manage my on-premise storage. They were one of the first groups that came to me and said, okay, when we move to the cloud, what happens to my job? I said, well, first of all, you're going to love it because instead of worrying about running out of storage every day, I'm going to ask you to make sure that we're optimizing and lowering our storage costs every day. In fact, you'll be able to see the results every day. You'll get a report back. You'll see a dashboard that will tell you if you take this data that's not quite used a lot and move it to lower cost, cheaper storage, you're going to save X dollars. I said, so I still need this function, but instead of just trying to shuffle disks around to save space, I need you to think about the business impact and help us decide. Because left to everyone's own devices, everybody wants, when you move something to the cloud, they want it on the high speed, most expensive storage. But by watching your data, you can see how best to use that. So it's a culture change across the board. And again, my advice to anyone is you cannot over-communicate a culture change. If you think you're covering it, double your efforts and talk more about it. And then also be an active listener, hear what people are telling you on what their concerns on so you can address those.
I want to switch gears a little bit because you mentioned earlier, Guy, that you're pulling together an IT strategy for OPM that aligns with the OPM strategic plan. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about the strategy and what are the key priorities you have outlined in that strategy?
Definitely moving to the cloud is my top priority. I mean, outside of what we've already talked about on hiring the right staff and making sure that we have training and all that, assuming that's all in place, I believe the cloud is the best way for the federal government to provide the best services to our citizens. Making sure that we're investing in our employees with that continuing training, realize that we can't just hire somebody and let it stagnate, that we want to give them a future with it. And it's really one of the things I'm most excited here that I didn't get to do before is that the tools have progressed since the last time I took an agency to a cloud, which was 5 years ago. Maria wrote, and I did that at the SBA. We were trusted by the senior leadership to do it because we said this is the way, but we didn't really have to show them a lot. Nowadays, and I didn't have the data to show it, we both knew that it was going to provide better service at either the same cost or approximately the same cost, but things that we couldn't do. Now today, we're actually in the middle of running tools to calculate the cost of moving every single system to the cloud. I didn't have that hard data before. I'm going to have it now. And we've already worked out our plan on how we're going to migrate and what we're going to move. We've used what the Federal CIO Council came out with, an application rationalization process. We've used that where basically you take each system and you put it in a grid of 4 things. One is nobody's using the system, so we're going to turn it off. And there's always those, and you don't want to migrate those. There's ones that this is so complex or convoluted that we have to totally rewrite it, so it needs to stay on-premise for now. And then there's ones where this can move to the cloud quickly as infrastructure as a service, and then the fourth one is we could switch it to platform as a service. Mm-hmm. So we've already done that analysis, and what my team did, which was really great, is they put a level of effort estimate on it. So not only do I have that heat map, but for each system, I have how hard it is to do. So the ones that are very easy to move and have the biggest impact in the upper right quadrant, those are the things we're going to tackle first. But now, probably by the end of January, I'll have the financial data and be able to go back and show the leadership team, here's why we're moving this application to the cloud, here's how much it will cost in the cloud. Because it's even today, and I mentioned earlier, 18 years, come on, the cloud's not new. The costing of the cloud and consumption model is still something people are struggling with, and the fear of somebody's going to hit a switch and we're going to have $1 million bill overnight. That story is still out there. So being able to show here's what it's actually going to cost, and then the CapEx model of I'm not going to need to go buy a new data center every 5 years where I'm going to come and say I need $30 million above and beyond my budget just to buy and keep everything like we have it. I find CFOs love that. If a CIO works closely with their CFO and says, look, instead of me coming to you and saying I need to rebuy the data center every 5 years and it's this massive increase, can I give you a steady line cost instead? And every CFO will say, give me that steady line cost instead of that massive increase. So those are all parts of doing it. I didn't mention it earlier. The CIO, to be successful, absolutely must work hand in hand with the financial team because this is a change for them too. And being able to explain these things to them is really a big help. In fact, one of the first applications I moved to the cloud was a CFO application. Congress has decided to give us a priority of building a new health benefits program for the U.S. postal workers with a very short time frame. So that is a very big priority for us. We are working across organization to do that, and the rules are different for that. So the current federal employee health benefits system has a different set of rules than what was mandated for the Postal Service. So we really have to build a whole new system. The eligibility is different. The way it'll pay the health programs that will be available to the postal workers are all going to be different. So they might have thought it was just a quick modification of what we had, but it's really a whole different system. So that's a huge priority. And then obviously with every administration, the priorities of the Biden administration on helping DEIA. We've built the first dashboards for the federal government for DEIA. Strong push for bringing in early career talent, which is their way of talking about interns and people early in their career. We're doing all of those initiatives too to support that effort. But stabilizing the infrastructure that I inherited, which was not stable, and then moving us to the cloud and also supporting all these initiatives. Something that we did is we turned on enterprise dashboarding for everybody, so that my experience in the past is you had the haves and the have-nots. Some people could afford the BI tools and some didn't. I made it uniform so that everybody at OPM can create dashboards, and it's growing like wildfire because we have a great amount of data, being the HR agency of the federal government, and we weren't able to display that in easy-to-use formats. Now we're headed that way, and I think both what's going to be available for citizens to see on the OPM website and also internally in the federal government for various agencies, we're going to make their data much easier for them to decide how long does it take a agency to hire a certain class of person. Being able to compare that to, wait a minute, here's 2 agencies that do it in half the time. If they're smart, they'll call those 2 agencies and say, hey, this is taking us this long. How are you able to cut it in half? So not only the data, but being able to use the results of the data to change business practices is huge.
So data, you've mentioned data a couple of times in our conversation, and data is transforming society, business, and the economy. I was wondering, where are you with the OPM data strategy, and perhaps you can give us some progress on that area?
So OPM decided to create a chief data officer, which I really supported, and actually I helped hire. So we have a chief data officer now. Interesting study of government is where does a chief data officer report? So we have found that there's about a 3-3-3 break on it. About a third report to the CIO, about a third report to the agency front office, the administrator, director, whatever the agency name is, not necessarily right to that director, but one of the lieutenants there. And then a third report to the CFO or other offices. So there doesn't seem to be a consistent form that everyone's went, aha, that's the right way to do it. So in our case, the chief data officer does not report to me, but we partner very closely. In fact, I gave him and his team almost half of my all-hands meeting this week with my staff so that the entire federal IT force could hear from him on where they are on developing the chief data strategy. So what I mentioned earlier, agency went first with the agency strategic plan. I went next with the IT strategic plan, and then the chief data officer said, okay, I'm going to use both of those to develop our data plan. So right now, one of those is public. The other two, we're working through our processes to get them public, but we're all integrated, and that's very important. Privacy is a big part of that, too. We have a lot of privacy data that we want to make sure is protected. So we're working closely with our chief privacy officer, too, on what type of data can we expose that will still maintain privacy. If somebody combined multiple data sets, it won't let them narrow it down to someone. So really active across all three areas. So and the chief privacy officer does not report to me either. So again, we've had to build a coalition across the three of us to make sure that our organizations stay in alignment. And in my long career, one thing I've seen talking about the IT governance battle, try to take data ownership away from somebody who's owned it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What I've been successful in doing, because that's not successful, is you have to come up with a new enterprise data hub and let them still own their data environment, but get them to buy into sharing data with that. And then once you show them that, oh, by the way, by doing that, if somebody calls another part of the organization and updates their mailing address and they didn't call you, we can provide that updated data back to you so that that citizen doesn't have to call my office first and then turn around and call your office to give you the same information. My experience is you can do that way and show people that this is really better to go to a unified data model instead of having ownership of individual silos. Ordering them to do it or telling them, forcing them to do it does not usually work.
I mean, we go from data privacy, and my next question was around your efforts around cybersecurity and maybe dealing with resiliency, building that redundancy in which you talked about with the migration to the cloud. But what are you doing in the area of cybersecurity? Is Zero Trust, how does that play into your journey?
Yes, luckily this is my second agency for Zero Trust because I'd already started it at SBA.
Oh, okay.
We because of that effort, we went early to the Technology Modernization Fund and put in a request to, because of the federal budget cycle, it would have been 2 years before I could have asked for Zero Trust money, so I went to TMF instead. And we were one of the few agencies that got early approval on that. I think there were 3 of us that got approval. We are well underway to implementing that now. Something that my CISO has done, which I didn't have to encourage him, but he worked with Maria Rote and me at SBA, so he knows how we work. He's sharing everything with the federal community on here's where we are on our journey. For any agencies that are behind us or haven't started yet, we will definitely share best practices, lessons learned, what were the roadblocks, what would we do differently. Zero Trust, I think absolutely with today's cyber attacks is the way we have to go to protect our data. The old build a moat around your network and you'll block everybody there, but once they're inside, they can go anywhere. The hackers have proven that is their favorite model, that they can get in and go anywhere. So I'm excited about that. Like I said, we're well on our way on the journey. It is going to take a couple years to do it fully, and we're able to do it in stages so that we can do that. One thing, again, going back to user experience, what we did at SBA is we replaced the VPN with the Zero Trust connection, and that meant that the end user went from having to click on about 8 things to get started every day. We went down to 2 things. Put in your PIV card, type your PIN, and you're done. So the users love that because sometimes with the VPN client, they couldn't tell, did it connect or did it not connect? From a cyber perspective, the CISO and I love it because with a VPN, you had the option of a user could turn it off and still use their laptop. With Zero Trust, we don't allow them to turn it on. If they're going to log onto their laptop, it's always going to be connected through Zero Trust. So we're able to do patching, we're able to collect performance data, all the things where if they're not logging in with the VPN, we weren't able to do. So that's the easy part of Zero Trust. Taking Joe and Sally and then deciding Joe's going to get this access to these 3 systems at this level and nothing else, and Sally can have access to these 5 systems at this level. That's a lot of legwork, and that's going to take us longer, but I'm excited about that.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Guy Cavallo, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government technology and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at iTunes or on your favorite podcast app, and as always at businessofgovernment.org.